PlayStation is losing a lot of employees. Now, I have no idea how interested in the business side people are who watch this channel of entertainment, because it does tie directly into the end products, the end art, the end entertainment that is created, whether it be movies, games, books, whatever. But it's also very disheartening a lot of the times the way it works, and this is one of those examples. This is very similar to what happened with Xbox. That's actually one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this, because I felt like it would be hypocritical to purposely dog on Microsoft for that and not talk about what Sony is doing. Because at the end of the day, I'm not a Sony fanboy. I'm not an any company fanboy when it comes to plastic boxes that play games. I think they're cool. I really like some of the exclusives or the brand IPs behind them. You know, things like Jak and Daxter for Sony, something they haven't done anything with in a long time, or Halo for, Microsoft when it's actually done right. I really like those things, and I like the people who make them a lot of the times, but I also know that a lot of people don't care about that stuff. They just look at what we receive. Unfortunately, this kind of stuff plays really heavily into those situations, and the Sony PlayStation situation is not really above reproach. It's not like this is, Xbox did it and they're a bunch of selfish bastards, but Sony did it and it was needed for business. I don't really feel that way, but again, I'm somebody who makes videos out of my office in my house. I am not a multi-billion-dollar CEO. That said, this is a bit frustrating to me because they are losing 900 employees. It's probably going to end up being more as well because layoffs happen individually as well. This is just a mass layoff. But essentially what it is Jim Ryan announced this, other people announced this, essentially saying that the leadership team and I made the incredibly difficult decision to restructure operations, which regrettably includes a reduction in our workforce, impacting very talented individuals who have contributed to our success. Which, this is the unfortunate part, is that these are talented people who did contribute to Sony's success. And the reason that I have a problem with this, the reason that I'm frustrated with this situation with Sony, is not because I don't think there needs to be some kind of change. Because there does need to be some kind of change. Games are getting way too expensive to make. You look at even things like Spider-Man 2 cost reportedly $300 million, and even Sony kind of rushed it out the door, which I think was a mistake at that point with that much money sunk in and the amounts of millions of copies it sold. I feel like you might as well have just put a little more in so that it didn't have all the criticisms at launch. But regardless of all of that, the reason I'm frustrated about this is because these are people who helped make PlayStation what it is, and once again, it's not the executives taking the hit. Now, I understand the argument, okay? I'm not trying to be like a huge socialist here, or a socialist capitalist, as has become very popular in America now, popularized by some Twitch streamers, YouTube streamers, stuff like that, like where you have, $1 trillion, but you advocate for giving all your money away, but you live in a mansion or something like that. I'm not trying to be a hypocrite here, okay? I don't exactly have a ton of money myself, and because of that, I understand that my opinion on this is going to hold zero water or zero weight for a lot of people. But a situation similar to this that happened all the way back in 2013 was with Nintendo, with then CEO Satoru Iwata, and he actually took a 50% pay decrease in order to avoid mass layoffs like this. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people have pointed out, and I'll put some sources in the comments down below, or the description down below, that, at the time they were working on the Switch, so they needed to maintain a high morale in order to get this thing out as good as possible, to which I would say I understand that that could be a business decision as well, but his justification at the time was that losing talented workers that are going to make their brand better isn't necessarily going to make their brand more sustainable in the long run, especially when he at the top had the ability to take, a multi-million-dollar pay cut, and because he was pretty much set for the rest of his life, and instead just keep those employees. This is something that unfortunately I think leaders should have to do. I know that they're not forced to do it, but sometimes a leader has to fall on the sword. If you are making $1 billion a year, and you could make $300 million instead, which is more than enough for anyone to be living off of, obviously, and you instead opt to cut $700 million worth of jobs, there better be a damn good reason for that. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like at the very least, you should be taking a bit of a hit too. This is very similar to what Microsoft did. The one justification that I will give in this case for Sony, which I can see their side on, is that they're trying to back away a little bit from how much games cost, from the idea of some of these industry trends they've been chasing. For example, live service, because reportedly the Twisted Metal live service game that was in development or early in development has been canceled, and it's looking like that's going to be what's happening in some different places. It's looking like Insomniac, which was also hit with these reductions, it might, I'm stressing might, and it might come out later that this is different, might be that this was also connected to the live service supposed Spider-Verse game that they were floating around. Who knows how far in development that was? Who knows if it was anywhere, because there's almost zero transparency in the entertainment industry, something that I think is really unfortunate but true. But if the Twisted Metal game was canceled, and that was part of the layoffs, this live service game, it's possible that that's also what was going on at Insomniac. That said, part of why Spider-Man 2 cost so much to make is because Insomniac does treat their talent at their studio pretty good. You know, they actually try and give them things like paid time off. They actually try and give them, which I know some people are going to say, well, why do they get paid time off? Most good businesses give you some sort of paid time off. That's not a video game thing for lazy people. That's just a thing that most good businesses do, is you earn that. You know, they try and give good benefits to their people. They try and make their workers comfortable. Unfortunately, it seems like that also contributed to the hefty price tag of development of Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 still came out with issues. We still haven't gotten that patch yet. We're going to get it very, very soon, because when I record this, it's February 29th of 2024. So if you're watching this after then, yes, I know by now you in the future got the patch. At the time that I'm talking about, we didn't yet, of getting New Game Plus, replayable missions, you know, features that many people criticized the game for and said, hey, this should have been in the game at launch. And there was also a lot of stuff coming out of cut story beats as well. And my point is with that Insomniac tried to treat their workers good, and it still led to layoffs within the company mandated by Sony above them. No matter what you feel about Spider-Man 2, it might be your least favorite superhero game of all time. You might love it to death. It might be your favorite video game you've ever played. That sucks, because getting a big email about how we respect you, you know, you have our deepest respect, we appreciate you, you know, we cherished you, all this stuff that they're saying in these messages and emails and stuff, when right at the top, the executives refuse to take any kind of hit themselves. Like, the leadership who makes decisions, sorry, I can't speak, is never the one who actually has to fall on the sword anymore. They're never the ones who have to take the hit. It's always the bottom guy, the little guy, that does. And that's unfortunately just a part of the bloody side of capitalism, is that when there were supposed to be checks and balances in place so that it took account of human greed, when capitalism was kind of popularized, when you had the American justice system popularized, all these things, they were supposed to be taking into account human greed, human evil, right? But instead, unfortunately, what has happened is that people at the top will make more in a year than most people will make in their entire lifetime, and they won't let go of a penny of that. And that's kind of the situation where I see Sony at. Like, yes, I do think that there had to be a change. You know why? They fell short of their PlayStation sales goal as well, which I think was pretty lofty, but I believe they fell short by something like 4 million units for the projection now of 2024, which made their stock price drop by something like $10 billion-ish. That is a lot of money that they lost with that wrong projection, with that inability to sell consoles. But also, you have to realize that the economy, especially in America, and I would argue in the UK as well, especially, even if you don't look at the rest of Europe or the rest of the world, the two I can speak to very clearly are America and the UK. They've been going through a lot of problems with common people being able to afford stuff. To a lot of people, $500 for a console plus tax 500 US dollars, I should say, is a lot of money. That is a huge investment for something. It might not be for someone listening. You might have a really good job. You might be really well, doing really well for yourself. Congratulations, that's awesome. A lot of people aren't. And a lot of people aren't just doing bad for themselves because of decisions they're making, but again, because of leadership at the top. Because of people in political parties or people in businesses or whatever that are sabotaging, whether purposely or not, the systems that make the rest of society livable. When you have egg prices tripling at the store in the last few years, when you have it being harder and harder to maintain basic necessities, a lot of people aren't going to be going out of their way to buy a $500 console, especially if a lot of those games can still be played on PS4, the generation before, and especially when entertainment is so accessible. We don't live in the days anymore where you have to go to Blockbuster to rent a video game. There's Xbox Game Pass. It has its own problems of ownership and stuff I don't like, but it's made games super cheap and accessible to a lot of people. It's not the days anymore where you have to go to Hollywood Video or you have to go to Target or Walmart to buy a movie. Now, I still do it when there's a movie I love. A lot of people just quit. They don't do that anymore. They go on Netflix or they go on Disney Plus and they spend a amount every month and they get access to X amount of films. So there's all these entertainment media properties and entries floating around from decades and decades that are accessible to people. So a lot of people aren't rushing to buy new expensive tech to play what they believe is a limited selection of games. A lot of people are waiting to get that when it's a lot cheaper and when it doesn't really benefit the company anymore. Not on purpose for that reason, but because, well, why would I pay, $1,000 to get a PlayStation 5 plus, 6 or 7 new games? A lot of people don't have $1,000 to drop on that. For a lot of people, when a $1,000 car repair bill comes up, like their engine poops out or something, they're like, oh, geez, this hurts. They don't have that to throw at video games. With gaming becoming more expensive, with essentially all of these things becoming harder to obtain, average normal people, which I would say is the majority of my audience, they're not rushing out to buy stuff immediately. And unfortunately, when these companies have solutions to that, like decreasing the budget, maybe aiming the scope a little lower and prioritizing performance of the game over making the game as big as the entire continent of Africa, instead of making some of these weird decisions, they go bigger and bigger and bigger every time to try and make it a spectacle. And then what ends up happening is people get laid off. I think it's unfortunate. I think it sucks. I don't think Sony doesn't deserve the criticism that Microsoft got for this. I think they still do. The one silver lining to me with this whole thing is that it seems like it's going to be affecting more the games as a service route, because I think Sony is starting to realize that games as a service isn't a trend that can just be chased. Not everything can be a live service because a lot of people will reject that. It seems like Sony might be learning that. It's unfortunate that their response to that kind of thing and to restructuring is to cut the common man, is to get rid of the talent that helps make the company good. And hopefully that doesn't bite them in the ass. But even if it does, or doesn't, it's still sad for all the people who this happened to, because this is almost 9% of their entire workforce, I believe. 900 workers. It's crazy. So that's a lot of people, and that's going to be affecting a lot. It's just really sad. It's very sad to see. I hope those people find jobs. I hope they land on their feet, but unfortunately, they're going to have to figure it out, and they're probably not going to have a ton of help, but who knows? This kind of really hit me in the sore spot a little bit, because my whole time on YouTube, right? My whole time doing this job, which is pretty low income for me, and the main thing I do because of disability issues, where it's hard to do multiple things at once for me. My whole time here, I've always heard this kind of rhetoric, right? And I don't usually glorify it, but I have always heard it. I've always heard things like, why don't people just get a real job? Oh, well, this doesn't have any job security. You're an idiot for doing this. And I've heard this directed at me. I've heard it directed at a lot of people. And this reminds me a lot of what happened to my dad. My dad worked at a company for something like 20 years, helped design whole buildings in Minnesota. He was a draftsman. His job was to do structural support. So as in, like, if he didn't do his job right, people could die. The whole point was making sure buildings stood. Very important job. That's pretty important when you're making buildings. And after 20 some years, his entire department was laid off. And then they were systematically hired back over the next 5 years so that they no longer actually, they no longer were eligible for their employee benefits or their, basically from things from their tenure there because they had been gone for X amount of years and rehired, right? So that's something that happened in a supposedly stable field and a supposedly field with a lot of job security. Nobody is safe. It sounds very dark, but these companies view everyone as replaceable, which is why when I hear people say things like job security, blah, 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 unless you're a CEO or you're like in the top 1% of a company, you do not have job security. You don't. There are ways to get rid of you. There are ways to replace you with someone younger, someone that they will view as more, like less tainted by the world, right out of college, things like that. There are ways to get rid of you and get someone else instead. And it's just very sad because you think that going into a business like this, you're safe. You think that going into a business like this, you have a future and a career. But then you end up, browsing through Indeed.com trying to find jobs in your 30s or 40s because the guys at the top couldn't be bothered to take a pay cut and instead they got rid of you. I find it sad. I find it very ridiculous. But people always defend it with the classic defenses of, well, those people are the ones who supply jobs, blah, blah, blah. My point is just, yes, they do. And if they want to have a yacht, that's fine by me. But why do they need a dozen of them? That's my criticism of all of this, is not that the people at the top shouldn't be rich. That's up to people to decide that aren't me. But why they have to be as rich as they are when normal people end up on unemployment is just kind of a sick joke to me that I don't understand why anyone defends, and I never really will. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more content. I'm interested in your thoughts on all of this. I'm interested in what you think. I hope you all had a good day. I don't know why I said that, but I do hope you had a good day today. And I hope you have a good end of your week. I'm going to try to be back tomorrow with another video as well about something a little more uplifting and interesting. But that said, have a fantastic day. Everything is in the description as always. We have, of course, our Let's Play channel, Degenerate Plays, where we play through games. My wife, Jill, has her website, cosmobunny.shop, where we sell all kinds of stuff. We have a Fortnite creator code, which also works for our website as a discount code. That's DJAY123. And finally, as well, we do have other channels down there, like my new channel, JayRPG, where I do RPG and JayRPG videos. So I hope you all have a great day. As always, everybody, stay shway.